Nature doesn't always reveal its mysteries, but sometimes a simple gesture can show us what really matters. What this mother bear did will move you. Now imagine yourself in a frozen forest, where the wind howls like a grim warning and the snow blankets everything in an almost mystical silence. The cold cuts like sharp blades, and survival here is a daily battle. But in the midst of this hostile landscape, something extraordinary happens. Something that proves that love and gratitude can exist even in the wildest corners of the world. Have you ever heard of a bear that came back to say thank you? Sounds like something from legend, doesn't it? But this is a real story. A story that will make you rethink everything you believed about animal instincts, about the unbreakable bond between mother and child, and about their ability to feel something we call gratitude. Today, you will experience one of the most exciting moments ever recorded in wildlife. An unexpected meeting, a surprising gesture, and an ending that no one could have predicted. But first, answer me. Do you believe that animals can recognize those who help them? Do you believe that compassion can cross barriers between humans and wild creatures? If so, get ready. And if not, maybe this story will change your outlook forever. Amid the ice and silence of the Yukon Mountains in Canada, a mother bear and her cub fought a desperate fight for their lives. Hunger pursued them. The cold threatened to consume every ounce of energy. And the forest, once a refuge, now became a prison. The little cub, still fragile, could barely walk, and its mother, exhausted, began to lose strength. It was then that something unexpected happened. A human appeared in their path. But not a hunter, not a threat. Someone willing to risk everything to change that cruel fate. What happened next was something so powerful that few would believe it if they hadn't seen it with their own eyes. An act of courage, a rescue at the limit, and an outcome that challenges everything we know about wild nature. If you think this is just another survival story, think again. This is a story about invisible bonds, about the purest instinct there is, and about what happens when the paths of humans and animals cross in the most unlikely way possible. And when everything seemed to have come to an end, the unexpected happened. But to understand this story, we need to go back in time a little. We need to go back to the day when Noah, a lonely forest ranger, made a choice that would change his life forever. But before I continue this emotional story, I want to know your opinion. Have you ever witnessed or heard of a moment of connection between humans and wild animals? Do you think bears can feel gratitude, just like we do? Share in the comments. Your participation is essential for us to continue bringing incredible stories like this. And if you like real stories that touch the heart, that show the most surprising side of wildlife and the strength of compassion, leave a like. This helps the channel grow and bring these stories to more people who, like you, believe in the power of empathy. And of course, if you're not already part of our community, sign up now and activate the bell. Here, each video is an exciting journey, and I guarantee you won't want to miss the next chapters of this incredible relationship between humans and nature. Now let's go back in time and understand how it all started. The piercing wind howled across the white expanse of the Yukon, as if whispering ancient secrets of the forest. Dense snow covered every tree trunk, creating an almost untouched landscape, a kingdom where nature imposed its own rules. It was the beginning of winter, that cruel time when survival became a daily battle. The waters of the lake were already semi-frozen, forming a mirror of brittle ice that reflected the pale sky. The trees, tall and imposing, trembled to the rhythm of the wind, and the absolute silence was broken only by the cracking of the branches under the weight of the accumulated snow. Among these icy shadows, a figure emerged from the thick snow. Its thick, dark fur contrasted with the white landscape around it. Tulimak, an experienced mother bear, walked the desolate territory with steady steps. But something was wrong. His eyes, normally filled with wild determination, were tired. Its paws, so used to roaming freely through that territory, now moved hesitantly. Winter was just beginning, but she already felt the weight of hunger tightening her body. Behind her, a small figure struggled to follow her footsteps. Aklak, her cub, still young and vulnerable, stumbled through the deep snow, his short paws sinking into the soft ice. He tried to stay close to his mother, but every movement was a huge effort. The cold penetrated his skin, and the lack of food made each step more difficult. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't know why his mother was increasingly worried, why the hunts were frustrated, why the world seemed to be closing in around them. But he trusted her. He had always trusted. Tulimak sniffed the air. His instincts told him there was something nearby. Maybe food, maybe a threat. Hunger was already making his body ache, and Aklak needed something to eat. His eyes scanned the forest, alert for any sign of life. But there were no fresh tracks of elk or hares. The river, which used to be their source of fish before hibernation, was now practically frozen. Only shadows and the white immensity remained. She moved on, with Aklak trying to keep up, but her mother's heart knew time was running out. She needed to find something, anything. The cold was relentless, and the deep snow made their search difficult. His muscles were tense, his mind alert. Maternal instinct screamed that she could not fail. But then, a different smell reached his snout. A smell that didn't belong in the forest. A smell that made your senses sharpen. It was the smell of human. Normally, any bear would avoid contact with humans, but Tulimak was desperate. She knew that if she didn't find food soon, Aklak wouldn't survive to see spring. The decision she would make in the next few minutes would change their fate forever. Meanwhile, not far away, Noah, an experienced forest ranger, watched the white landscape from his small wooden cabin. He had lived there for years, accustomed to solitude and the relentless rules of nature. He knew that winter in the Yukon was unforgiving to anyone, neither humans nor animals. He pulled on his thick coat and went out to check his surroundings. His trained eye soon noticed something out of the ordinary. Footprints, big footprints. Footprints of a mother bear. But what really caught his attention was something else. Smaller, more clumsy footprints, alongside the larger ones. A mother and her calf. Noah's heart beat faster. He knew what that meant. If a mother bear was wandering so close to her cabin at that time of year, something was wrong. It was unusual behavior. Bears should be getting ready to hibernate, but this bear was walking, wandering, searching. He followed the footprints for a few meters, keeping a safe distance, watching for any sign of danger. And then, he saw her. Tulimak stood a few feet away, her dark eyes fixed on him. She didn't growl. She didn't advance. He just stood there, motionless, as if trying to make a decision. And behind her, Aklak staggered, visibly weak. Noah knew nature enough to understand that he was faced with a delicate choice. He couldn't get too close, as a wild bear was always unpredictable, but he also couldn't just ignore what he saw. He took a deep breath and took a step back, trying to demonstrate that he posed no threat. Tulimak watched his movement carefully. The wind blew hard at that moment, and Aklak huddled against his mother, shivering. Noah felt something inside him tighten. He was no stranger to nature. I knew I couldn't interfere directly. I knew that bears were wild creatures that should follow their natural course. But he also knew that sometimes nature broke its own rules. His gaze met Tulimak's for a brief moment. Two completely different worlds crossed at that moment. That of a man who dedicated his life to protecting animals, and that of a mother bear who would do anything to keep her cub alive. The decision that Noah would make at that moment would change not only his life, but also that of Tulimak and Aklak. But before continuing this exciting story, I want to hear from you. Do you believe that animals can feel gratitude? Have you ever heard a story about an animal that recognized who helped it? Write in the comments. Your participation is essential so that we can continue bringing these incredible stories. And if you're enjoying this journey, leave a like. This helps us reach more people who are passionate about heartwarming stories, about rescuing animals in danger. Here, each video is an unforgettable experience, and with your support, we can continue sharing unique moments of nature. Now hold on tight, because what happened after that encounter challenged everything Noah believed about wildlife. The snow fell in dense flakes, swirling in the air before landing softly on the trees and frozen ground. The silence of the forest was almost absolute. broken only by the whistling of the biting wind and the occasional crack of a branch, giving way to the weight of the accumulated snow. Noah adjusted his thick coat, stuffed his gloved hands into his pockets, and let out a long sigh, watching his breath turn into mist before his eyes. He had been there for 12 years, 12 harsh winters, facing storms, walking lonely trails and witnessing the relentless cycle of nature. As a park ranger, your job was to protect that wild territory, make sure poachers didn't trespass into the area, and sometimes help an animal in trouble. But never in all those years had he experienced anything like what was about to happen. His experienced eyes scanned the white landscape in front of him. Something was wrong. He felt it in his bones. The kind of intuition that only those who have spent too much time in nature develop. It was then that he noticed footprints. They were large, scattered across the soft snow, sunk with the weight of a huge animal. Noah reached down, touching the outline of the trail with his fingers. There was no doubt. Bare footprints. And they weren't old. Something big had passed through there recently. But what really caught his attention were other footprints. Smaller, tentative ones, next to the larger ones. A puppy. Noah frowned. Mother bears avoided contact with humans, especially at this time of year when they were about to hibernate. If Tulemak, as he knew that the bear was one of the residents of that region, was walking around with her cub, it meant that something was wrong. He stood up slowly, feeling the weight of that discovery press on his shoulders. I knew I shouldn't interfere directly, but I also knew that nature didn't always follow the rules that humans thought they knew. And then, he felt it. Didn't see it first. Felt. It was that instinctive sensation, that shiver on the back of the neck, the weight of an invisible gaze. He was not alone. His gaze moved slowly, sweeping the shadows between the trees. For an instant, everything seemed to freeze. The air became heavier, the wind ceased, and time slowed down. Then there, among the tall, snow-covered trunks, he saw her. Tulemash. The great bear was standing a few meters away, half hidden among the trees, her thick fur dusted with snow. The dark, deep eyes were fixed on him, but there was no aggression in his posture, just a silent caution, a careful study of the man in front of him. But Noah wasn't looking at her. Her eyes moved to the small figure cowering behind her mother, trembling. Aklak. The bear cub looked exhausted. Its small paws were barely able to hold onto the snow, and its snout pointed downwards, as if it were struggling against its own weight. He was breathing quickly, panting, his fragile body vibrating with cold and hunger. Noah felt his heart tighten. He had seen animals in danger before, but something about that scene moved him in a different way. Tulemak took a step forward, but made no threatening sound. He just watched, his gaze alternating between the man and his cub, as if evaluating, as if he was deciding. Noah knew he was facing something rare. Bears didn't seek out humans. Bears avoided humans. But this mother bear was there, standing in the snow, not running away, not attacking, just waiting. And that's when Noah realized she was asking for help. It was an absurd thought, totally contrary to everything he had ever learned about animal behavior. But at that moment he knew, with a certainty he couldn't explain, that Tulemak wasn't there by chance. The wind blew hard, lifting a veil of snow around them. Aklak staggered, his trembling legs giving way under his weight, and the cub fell into the soft snow with a muffled thud. Noah felt his breathing hitch. His instincts screamed to act. But he hesitated. If it got too close, it could scare them. If he moved too quickly, he could appear to be a threat. Slowly, very slowly, he raised his hands, open, with nothing in them. His body remained still, but his voice was low, almost a whisper. "All right, big boy." Tulemak raised his head, his eyes evaluating his every move. For a moment, Noah thought she was going to turn around and disappear into the forest with the cub, but she remained there. Time seemed to have stopped. Noah felt the weight of the bear's gaze on him, the cub's labored breathing, the cold wind cutting into his skin. Everything at that moment was a delicate dance between wildlife and human instinct. And then, something unexpected happened. Tulemak lowered his head and took a step back. It was subtle, small, but Noah understood. She was allowing it. His heart was pounding. He knew he was about to make a decision that would change everything. And I knew that once it was done, there would be no going back. Now tell me, have you ever imagined being face to face with a mother bear and realizing that she doesn't want to attack, but rather trusts you? Do you believe that animals can sense when they need help? I want to know your opinion. Write here in the comments what you would do in this situation. And if you like this story, leave a like. This helps the channel continue to bring you heartwarming stories like this, which show the incredible connection between humans and wildlife. And of course, if you're not already part of our community, sign up now and activate the bell. This way, you don't miss the next chapters of this incredible story, because what happened after that moment was something no one could have ever imagined. The snow fell slowly that winter afternoon, slowly covering the marks left by deep footprints in the frozen ground. The icy wind snaked between the tree trunks, making the dry leaves still clinging to the branches tremble, as if they were whispering ancient forest secrets. Noah adjusted the hood of his coat and squinted against the blizzard that was beginning to form. He didn't like that strange feeling, that tightness in his chest that came with the absolute silence of the forest. Something wasn't right. He had been patrolling the area for weeks, watching closely for signs of poaching. Normally, the bears would already be hidden, preparing for hibernation, but some fresh footprints in the snow indicated that an animal was still out there, roaming, and Noah knew that rarely meant anything good. His instinct had never deceived him before, and now he felt like he was about to find something that would change everything. That's when he saw it. At first, he thought it was just a broken branch, a stone covered in snow, but as he got closer, he realized that it was nothing like that. His heart quickened when he identified the small figure lying on the ground, a pile of dark fur shivering from the cold. Noah slowly lowered himself, trying to control his breathing. His gaze ran over the cub's body, and it was then that he saw the worst: a trap. The rusty steel of the trap gleamed beneath the snow, cruel and merciless, squeezing the bear cub's small paw with crushing force. The surrounding skin was bruised, dried blood mixed with ice, and the small animal's eyes reflected pure terror. He tried to move, tried to escape, but each effort only caused more pain. Noah felt a lump in his throat. He had encountered situations like this before. He had seen traps spread by poachers who didn't care about the suffering they caused. But something about that scene hit him differently. Maybe it was the size of the puppy, so small, so fragile. Maybe it was the low sound he made, an almost human wail, as if he was begging for help. He knew he didn't have much time. If the cub's mother were nearby, she could appear at any moment, and a desperate bear could be fatal to any human. But he also knew he couldn't just ignore it. Noah moved slowly, cautiously, and took out a small pair of pliers from his backpack. The cub growled weakly, his eyes wide with fear. "Calm down, big boy. I'm not going to hurt you," Noah murmured, his voice low, trying to convey a security that he himself didn't feel. He knelt in the snow, his heart hammering in his chest. Time seemed to slow down as his fingers, already numb from the cold, worked to release the trap mechanism. The metal creaked reluctantly, and then, with a sharp click, it opened. The puppy made a choking sound and pulled its paw closer to its body, shaking. Noah knew he was still too scared to understand what had happened. I knew he needed to get out of there quickly before his mother arrived. He took a step back, raising his hands to show he posed no danger. But it was at that moment that he felt a shiver run down his spine. The wind carried a strong smell in the air, a smell he knew well. And then right there among the snow-covered trees, two dark, watchful eyes appeared. Tulemak. The big bear was there, standing still, watching. Its muscles were tense, its claws half buried in the snow. Noah held his breath. He had seen a mother bear protecting her cub before, and he knew very well how it usually ended. The cub let out a low sound, an instinctive call, and the mother took a step forward. Noah prepared to retreat, If Tulimak saw him as a threat, he knew he wouldn't have time to escape. But then something unexpected happened. She didn't roar, didn't attack. It didn't advance. She just stood there, watching. For a moment, only silence existed between them. The snow fell slowly, as if even time had stopped. Noah felt his own heart beating too loudly inside his chest. Tulimak continued to stare at him, and something in her gaze made his skin crawl. It wasn't hate. It wasn't fear. It was something different. She knew. She saw the cub crawl slowly towards her, saw that he was hurt, saw the trap open in the snow, and she knew. For a moment that seemed to last an eternity. Noah and Tulimak looked at each other, two beings from completely different worlds, linked for a moment that no one else would ever understand. Then, without making a single sound, Tulimak approached the cub and placed it against his body, protecting it with his huge paw. Noah didn't move, didn't dare breathe. And then, as if nothing had happened, she turned and disappeared into the forest, taking a clock with her. Noah remained there, still, the cold no longer mattering. He knew he had just experienced something rare, something that might never happen again in his life. And he was right, because a year later that same mother bear would return. But not to ask for help. This time, she would come back, to thank him. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed or heard of a time when a wild animal showed something like gratitude? Do you think bears can recognize those who helped them? Tell me here in the comments. Write, I believe, if you feel that the connection between humans and animals goes far beyond what science can explain. Let's show together the strength of this bond, because what happened at the meeting between Noah, Tulimak, and Aklak was something no one could have predicted. The cold Yukon wind howled through the trees, blowing sharp gusts that made the snow dance in the air. Winter was already in full force, covering the forest in a thick white blanket, making the landscape almost indistinguishable between hills, rocks, and frozen lakes. Noah pulled his coat closer to his body, feeling the cold air bite his skin. He had spent many winters there, alone, and knew every sound, every smell, and every sign of the wilderness around him. But that morning, something felt different. An eerie silence hung in the air, a kind of emptiness that made him stop in the middle of his usual walk and scan his surroundings carefully. The days were long and lonely in that remote region. As a park ranger, his job was to ensure that poachers did not invade this protected territory, and he did so with dedication. But even after so many years of living in isolation, he was still surprised by the unexpected encounters that nature gave him. He had seen elk crossing the frozen lakes at dawn, wolves moving in silent shadows among the trees, and even bears before hibernation, lining their stomachs with the last prey of the season. But that day, there was something different. He noticed it first from the footprints. They were large, deep in the soft snow, and he recognized the shape immediately. A bear. Not just any bear. He knew those brands. His heart raced and his fingers instinctively tightened the strap of the rifle he carried on his shoulder. Not out of intention to use it, but out of pure survival reflex. Noah had never needed to shoot a bear before, and he hoped he never would. And then, there among the trees, he saw her. Tulimak. The large brown bear appeared among the snowy trunks, moving with the slowness of someone who fears nothing, but carries with her a presence that demands respect. His thick fur was lightly covered with snow, and his dark eyes met Noah's almost immediately. But it wasn't the mother bear that made his heart stop for a second. It was the one who was right behind her. Aklak. The cub he had freed from the trap a year before was now there, bigger, stronger, but still with that curious look that Noah would never forget. Aklak walked beside his mother, and even though his size was no longer so small, there was still a youthful air in his movements. But what really made Noah hold his breath wasn't their mere presence. That's what happened next. Tulimak took a few slow steps and stopped, watching Noah carefully. She didn't roar, she didn't growl, she didn't show any aggression, just looked at him. Noah knew that by instinct bears did not return to humans, much less to the one who, one day, had interfered with their survival. This was unheard of. But then, As if to break that frozen moment in time, Aklak walked forward. The young bear stopped a few meters away from Noah, slightly lowering his head and sniffing the air. His eyes studied him, as if trying to decipher something, as if they wanted to recognize that human who one day gave him back his freedom. And then, what happened made Noah question everything he knew about the wild. Aklak made a low sound, almost a soft growl, something that wasn't quite a call, but wasn't a warning either. It was something different. It was recognition. Noah felt a shiver run down his spine. He had already heard scientists say that animals don't feel gratitude like humans do, that they don't keep effective memories, that they only react to the environment according to their instincts. But there, in front of him, was proof that science might not yet have all the answers. Aklak knew who he was. The cub looked at its mother, as if seeking her permission, and then looked back at Noah. He moved closer, until his huge feet sank into the snow just a few feet away from the man. Noah stood still, not daring to make any sudden movements. He didn't want to break that rare moment. And then, Tulemak took one last look at Noah before raising his head to the wind. His gaze carried no threat. It was something different, something Noah never thought he would see in a wild animal of that size. It was respect. For a long moment, man and bear stood there, measuring each other across the time and space that separated them. There was no fear, no distrust, just a silent understanding that a year ago something unexpected had happened. And now, somehow, it was being recognized. Then Tulemak turned and began to walk away, his heavy paws marking the white ground. Aklak hesitated for a moment, looking one last time at Noah before following his mother. The sound of the snow compacting beneath his paws was the only thing that broke the deep silence of that forest. Noah remained where he was, unable to move. He knew he had just witnessed something that few people in the world would have the chance to see. He knew that from that day on he would never look at bears the same way again. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe that animals can feel gratitude? Have you ever seen a moment like this when an animal recognized someone who helped it? I want to know your opinion, so comment below. If you believe that animals have deep feelings, right. Animals never forget. This story is touching your heart as it is touching mine, so leave a like. This helps to continue bringing exciting stories like this and spread this message of connection and respect for nature to more people who believe that animals have a lot to teach us. Be part of our amazing community. Sign up now and activate the bell. This story isn't over yet. What happened after this reunion was something no one could have imagined. You will be surprised. Noah remained there, standing in the snow, watching Tulemak and Aklak's footprints disappear into the trees. The icy wind cut into his face, but he barely noticed the cold. His mind was stuck in that moment, in that silent exchange between him and those two wild beings. He had heard many stories over the years, legends told by hunters and explorers about animals returning to those who once helped them. But he never imagined something like this could happen to him. Scientists have always stated that animals do not feel gratitude in the same way as humans. They say that their behavior is guided purely by survival instinct, by simple cause and effect associations. But Noah couldn't accept that after what he had just witnessed. Tulemak's gaze was not that of an animal searching for food, nor that of a predator studying its prey. It was something different, something he couldn't explain, but he felt it deep inside. He remembered reading similar reports before, stories of bears in Russia that were rescued by rangers and, years later, were seen hanging around those same men's cabins. In Alaska, there was the famous case of a hunter who freed a bear from a trap and, years later, found footprints around his cabin, as if that same bear had returned to watch him from a distance. There was something about these animals that science still couldn't measure. Something that went beyond biology and instinct. That night changed Noah forever. He returned to his cabin with thoughts weighing on his mind. For years, he had considered himself a protector of wildlife, but he always maintained an emotional distance from what he did. For him, his job was to ensure that bears and other animals could live without human interference. without being threatened by hunters or the destructive impact of civilization. But now, for the first time, he wondered if there was something more to this relationship between humans and animals, something that could not be explained by biological rules alone. Over the next few days, he found himself constantly thinking about his reunion with Tulimak and a clock. He returned to the same spot a few times, hoping perhaps to see them again. But the footprints had disappeared with the fresh snow, and there were no more signs of them in the area. But something inside him had changed. He began to observe nature with new eyes. Every footprint in the snow, every distant sound in the forest seemed to contain an untold story. He began to wonder how many times over the years the animals he helped might have returned to see him, watching him from the shadows, without him realizing it. One night, while making a cup of hot tea, he heard a soft noise outside. His heart sped up for a moment, hope rising in his chest. He opened the door slowly, the cold air entering the cabin like a warning. But there was nothing there, just the darkness of the forest and the wind whistling through the trees. But then, he saw it. In the snow, a few meters from the door, there were footprints. They were big, deep, and next to them, smaller footprints. Noah felt a shiver run up his spine. He slowly walked over to the markings on the floor, kneeling down to take a closer look. They were recent, very recent. His gaze lifted to the dark forest before him, and for an instant he swore he saw something move among the trees. A large, strong figure, silent as the night itself. He held his breath, waiting, but nothing else happened. The figure disappeared into the darkness without a sound, without a sign. Noah stayed there for a few minutes, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew it was no coincidence. I knew that somehow Tulimak and Aklak had returned once again, not to ask for help, not because they needed something. They had come back just to remind him that, in nature, some connections are never lost. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe that animals can feel gratitude? Have you ever seen or heard of a case like this? I want you to write here in the comments the phrase, "Animals remember," if you believe that the bonds between humans and animals can be deeper than we imagine. And of course, if you're not already part of our community, sign up now and activate the bell. Here, each video is a thrilling journey into the heart of the wild, and I guarantee you won't want to miss what comes next. Because this story isn't over yet. What happened after that reunion was even more surprising, and I'll tell you everything. Noah remained there, standing in the snow, his eyes fixed on the footprints that were lost in the darkness of the forest. The cold wind blew around them, carrying with it the smell of burning wood from the fireplace inside the cabin. But at that moment, he didn't feel the cold, nor the weight of time. His mind was stuck in that scene, in that moment that seemed almost unreal. Tulimak and Aklak had returned, not to ask for help, not out of necessity. They came back because, somehow, that moment from the past still existed between them. It was impossible not to think about what that meant. For years, Noah lived in the forest, observing, protecting, trying to understand the patterns of nature. He always believed that animals were guided only by instinct, by the need to survive. But that reunion showed something different. It showed that perhaps wildlife had its own way of recognizing kindness, of remembering those who made a difference. And then he asked himself, if even animals recognize an act of kindness, why do we humans forget it so easily? Why do we so often ignore those who helped us? Why do we close our eyes to other people's pain? If a bear, an animal considered wild, instinctive, driven only by the fight for survival, was able to recognize Noah, what did that say about us? Humanity is proud of its ability to feel empathy, to create bonds, to understand the suffering of others. But at the same time, he always seems to be rushing around, always forgetting what really matters. People pass each other on the streets without exchanging a glance. Friends who were once close stop talking to each other over time. Small gestures of kindness are increasingly rare in a world where everyone is only focused on themselves. But the truth is that small gestures can change lives. Noah remembered the moment he saw a clock trapped in the trap. He didn't need to have done anything. He could have simply gone on his way, ignored that puppy, thought it wasn't his problem. But he chose to act. He chose to risk. And now, a year later, that seemingly small act had created a bond that no one could have predicted. Love and compassion go beyond words. They express themselves in actions. In nature, there are no speeches, empty promises, or unfulfilled intentions. Everything is done through gestures, concrete attitudes. A mother bear protects her cub with her own life, without needing to say a single word. A wolf shares its hunt with the rest of the pack because it knows that its survival depends on the survival of everyone. A bird brings food to its partner because it understands that taking care of another is as important as taking care of itself. And perhaps that was what humanity needed to relearn. Compassion is not in big speeches or distant promises. It's in small acts, in daily decisions. It's about helping someone without expecting anything in return, offering a smile to a stranger, stopping to listen, really listen, when someone needs to vent. And sometimes compassion is in a man kneeling in the snow, freeing a bear cub from a trap, not knowing that a year later that same bear would return to show that somehow he remembered. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever done something for someone, whether human or animal, without expecting anything in return? Have you ever seen a gesture of compassion that left an impression on you? I want you to write here in the comments the phrase, "Goodness always comes back." If you believe that our actions, no matter how small, have the power to transform the world around us. Nature always has unexpected ways of teaching us something powerful. Show that you also believe in this by leaving a like and helping this story go further. Because this story isn't over yet. What happened after that reunion was even more surprising, and I'll tell you everything. Noah remained silent, his eyes fixed on the white expanse in front of him. The forest stretched out like a frozen sea, snow-covered trees swaying gently in the wind, while a thin veil of fog began to form between the distant hills. The sound of the sharp breeze was the only thing that broke that almost sacred silence. He took a deep breath, feeling the cold air fill his lungs, but his thoughts were far from there. If he closed his eyes for a moment, he could go back in time. He could feel the adrenaline pumping through his veins again when he found Aklak trapped in the trap, his scared eyes begging for help without making a single sound. It could relive the tension of releasing the calf, the fear that the mother would appear enraged, ready to defend it. But instead, what happened was something that defied all logic, all expectation. Tulimak simply watched. She didn't attack. She didn't run away. He just stood there motionless, staring at him in a way that Noah would never forget. He blinked, and the next memory came like a bolt of lightning. A year later, standing in the snow, seeing those same eyes again, feeling that same shiver run down your spine as Tulimak approached without hostility. Young Aklak at his side, hesitant but curious. The slight sound the cub made, a low growl, almost a recognition. Noah didn't need words to understand what was happening. There was no doubt within him. Those bears knew who he was. They knew what he had done. His gaze returned to the forest in front of him, where Tulimak and Aklak had disappeared once again, their footprints already beginning to be covered by the slowly falling snow. He wondered if he would see them again. Part of him hoped so, but he knew nature didn't follow predictable scripts. Each wildlife encounter was unique, a gift that could not be asked for, only received when fate decided. The sunlight, already weak on the horizon, reflected off the ice, creating a golden glow that contrasted with the infinite white around it. Noah sat on a snow-covered rock, resting his elbows on his knees, his mind still processing everything. He remembered the exact moment he first saw Aklak, so small, so fragile, his fur stained with dried blood from the trap. The cub had grown up. It was strong. I was healthy. He survived. And that was all that mattered. The images jumbled together in his mind, the past and present merging, every detail engraved like an untouchable painting. He saw Aklak's expression of pain when he tried to free himself from the trap. He felt the tension of the moment he managed to free him. The sound of metal opening, the cub staggering back, hesitating between running away and remaining there, confused. He remembered Tulimak's heavy breathing when she appeared, her dark eyes analyzing her every move. He remembered the snow falling all around him, the endless seconds before she simply turned around and disappeared into the forest. And then, time advanced. The scene changed to a year later. Noah's gaze crossed Tulimak's once again, only now there was no fear, no tension, just a silence loaded with meaning. A clock looking directly at him, without the fragility he had before. Noah could almost hear the rustling of the snow beneath the cub's paws as he walked towards him. And at that moment, in that small sound that a clock made, something invisible closed like a circle that was finally complete. He wondered how many other stories like this had happened and never been told. How many encounters like that remained lost in the vastness of the forests without anyone knowing. How many humans have been watched from a distance by wild eyes that remembered, that recognized, but never had the chance to demonstrate. The forest seemed to have swallowed the bears once again, but somehow, Noah knew that connection would never disappear. He felt that somewhere among the shadows of the trees, Tulimak and Aklak were still there. Maybe watching, maybe following your own path. But in an inexplicable way, he knew that their destinies would remain linked forever. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe that animals really remember those who help them? Do you think there is an invisible connection between humans and nature that science has not yet been able to explain? I want you to write here in the comments the phrase, "The bonds of nature are eternal," if you believe that certain connections are never broken. If this story moved you, leave a like. This helps us continue to bring you more heartwarming stories of incredible rescues, moments of pure instinct and compassion between humans and animals. And if you're not already part of our community, sign up now and activate the bell. Here, each video is a thrilling journey into the heart of the wild, and I guarantee you won't want to miss what comes next. Because this story isn't over yet. What happened after this reunion was even more surprising, and I'll tell you everything. Noah remained there, standing in the snow, his eyes fixed on the white expanse in front of him. The cold wind howled through the trees, but he barely felt the cold. His mind was still immersed in the sequence of events that had unfolded before him, something that not even he, with years of experience in the wild, could have predicted. Tulimak and Aklak did not return by chance. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a gesture that defied everything he believed he knew about animal instincts. He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment, allowing himself to feel the energy of that moment. For years, he had seen nature operate in a raw and relentless way. He witnessed the animals' struggle for survival, the strict rules of the natural cycle, where only the strongest resisted. But from time to time, stories like this came along, stories that defied logic, that seemed to want to remind us that nature was not just brutality, but also mystery, connection, and perhaps even gratitude. We don't always expect something in return, but sometimes the universe surprises us with a gesture that we will never forget. Noah always believed his work in the forest was one-sided. He was there to protect, to watch, to ensure that the animals had a chance to live without human interference. But now he saw that perhaps his presence there was not as invisible as he imagined. Tulimak and Aklak weren't just wild creatures following their instincts. They had felt his presence, they had remembered him, and somehow, they returned. He wondered how many stories like this had happened and never been recorded. How many magical encounters between humans and animals have remained hidden, unnoticed, because we simply haven't paid attention. How many times do we ignore the signs that nature gives us? The snow continued to fall gently, and Noah felt a strange peace growing within him. He looked up at the gray sky, where the sun was beginning to disappear over the horizon, casting a golden glow over the white landscape. Something inside him said that moment would stay with him forever. It didn't matter if he never saw Tulimak or Aklak again. What mattered was what that encounter had taught. Nature has profound lessons to teach. We just need to look with an open heart. He realized that no matter how many years he spent in that forest, no matter how much he studied the animals and observed their behaviors, He would never know everything. There would always be something new, something unexpected, something that challenged your certainties. Nature was not just a spectacle to be admired from a distance. It was a living, pulsating world, full of meanings that only those who really allow themselves to feel can understand. How many people went through life without noticing the beauty around them, without realizing the silent force of nature, without understanding that each creature, each living being, had its own journey, its own challenges, its own stories to tell. Perhaps Tulimak never thought of Noah as a human who helped her. Perhaps Akhlaq did not return with the intention of thanking him. But somehow, their actions created a connection. And that was enough. That was all. Now, I want to hear from you. Do you believe that there are moments when nature gives us signs, teaches us lessons that go beyond what we can understand? I want you to write here in the comments the phrase, "Nature always teaches us," if you believe that each encounter with wildlife carries a greater meaning. Some connections are so powerful that they defy everything we know. What Noah experienced proves that nature still holds mysteries that go beyond logic. And believe me, this wasn't the last time something like this happened. This story proves that the bonds between humans and animals are deeper than we imagine. Press like now and help spread this incredible message to more people. And if you want to continue following exciting wildlife stories, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. There's so much more to come. And now, don't stop here. The next video is already on your screen, and I guarantee you, it will give you goosebumps. Click and discover another impressive story of the connection between humans and animals.